The early 2000s marked a golden age for survival horror games. Resident Evil was a dominant force, Silent Hill 2 would soon come out and revolutionize psychological horror, and numerous other titles contributed to the genre's rich landscape. The PlayStation 2, with its expansive game library, offered a wide array of horror experiences. Gamers could choose from the well-known franchises such as the aforementioned Resident Evil and Silent Hill, or explore more experimental titles such as Fatal Frame, Manhunt, or The Suffering. Predating these, however, was a little-known game for the console called Extermination, an odd but interesting horror game that I'm willing to bet most people have never heard of. This survival horror game, often considered the first of its kind for the PlayStation 2, vanished into obscurity as quickly as it arrived. The game wasn't the best or worst by far, or even the most memorable, but it is, however, a really interesting time capsule of early survival horror, so I wanted to take a deeper look at it. Following the trend in my last video where I take a look at an obscure game from my childhood, I decided to revisit this game to see if it was any good, and oh boy what a time I was in for. So without further ado, stockpile your healing items and let's dive into Extermination. One last thing before we get into it though, consider hitting the like button and subscribe button as it helps the channel immensely and I'd appreciate it a ton. Alright, now back to the video. Extermination was released in July of 2001, marketed as the first survival horror game for the PS2, developed by Deep Space Inc., a company with exactly 2 games under their belt before dissolving, and published by Sony. It was advertised as a next-gen evolution of the survival horror genre, and despite having quite a few neat ideas, it never really made the impact it set out to. Fun fact, this was actually my first exposure to survival horror. I didn't know what a Resident Evil was, but I did have this game that my dad probably got out of a Walmart bargain bin for the PlayStation 2. Delving into the development backstory with this game, as I enjoy doing for these videos, I was surprised to learn that not much is known about the actual development of this title, aside from the fact that the game was initially being developed by Whoopee Camp, developers behind Tomba, before disbanding with most of the team moving over to Deep Space. Interestingly enough, Sweaty65, the man behind Deadly Premonition, was one of the writers for this game. That alone is strange as this game's plot is pretty straightforward and cliché as you'll soon see, and I don't know what the hell was going on with Deadly Premonition.
Sounds like the sinner's sandwich. Self-inflicted punishment to atone for past sins.
Stranger yet, the game was localized twice, with the North American and European versions of the game having many differences, including a different cast of voice actors with different voice directions and a complete redesign of the main character. Why they wasted the money to do this, I'll have no idea, and it's a mystery that will keep me up at night, I'm sure. What, we have Leon Kennedy at home wasn't good enough for you? Anyway, with the absolute mess that the development was, you might expect that this game would also end up being kind of a mess, and you'd be completely correct, but in kind of a fun way. But to get there I have to discuss basically the entire plot and gameplay. The setup for this game is pretty cookie-cutter survival horror. You play as U.S. Marine Sergeant Dennis Riley, who along with his team are sent to the top-secret Fort Stewart research base in Antarctica following a distress call. The call tells them to immediately nuke the base, but we disregard that and instead send in the Marines to check it out. On the way there, the plane coincidentally malfunctions and crash lands outside the base, scattering most of the team. Upon landing, we find out that everyone is to group up in Ground Facility Building B, so we head out to make our way there. You and your partner Roger wind up just outside the base, and you go through a little tutorial section that gets you accustomed to the controls, which are a strange mix of over-the-shoulder and tank controls, and if that sounds clunky, trust me it is, however it is playable, and eventually you get used to it. It could be the Stockholm Syndrome, but by the end of the game I found myself genuinely enjoying the clunky mess that is the gameplay for this game. The big difference between this game and more traditional survival horror of the time is that you can do a bit of platforming for better or worse. I think I died more often to falling off things than I did to the enemies, but more on that later. We get inside the base, finding that the power is out and the place is trashed and deserted. To proceed, we have to get the bridge down, so Roger sends you out to scout out the area and see if you can get the power back on in order to lower the bridge, while he stays behind at the control center doing the very important job of staring into the wall and occasionally hitting a button to unlock a door. We go down a hallway into the next room over where we get the first taste of combat. You start the game with the Special Purpose Rifle, an assault rifle that can be customized with all sorts of gadgets, from a variety of different kinds of scopes to an entire rocket launcher and flamethrower attachment, which may or may not violate the Geneva Convention. Being able to change all this out on the fly was actually a really neat idea. As long as you play smart and manage your resources and ammo, you'll generally have this handy multi-tool for almost any situation. Apart from that, you've got a knife which has a slow heavy attack or a series of light attacks, which can be used if you really want to conserve ammo, or if you're like me and you blow it all out your ass and you have to knife things to death. In the quest to get the power back on, you'll then encounter the most basic of enemies, which the game creatively refers to them as bugs. They're these small alien-like bugs that can spit infectious goo at you and sometimes jump on you to inject the goo straight into you. Which brings me to another aspect of the game that tried to be a little bit different and introduce some new ideas to survival horror with the infection system. Most enemies can do damage both to your health and sometimes in the form of the infection rate. Once you reach 100%, your max HP is cut to 60 and you constantly take damage, and once fully infected, you can only be cured by specific rare healing items for use at specific healing beds scattered throughout the facility. This keeps every encounter tense and really encourages you to run from the enemies rather than fight in some cases, because even the smallest enemies can overwhelm you quickly. We manage to get the power back on, and on the way back, an exposed wire causes an explosion which knocks Dennis out the door and back towards the control center. As we make our way back, we hear Roger shooting at something.
What are you aiming at?
And arrive just in time to see him get swarmed by bugs, prompting this really cool cutscene where he mutates into a monstrous creature. Honestly, I absolutely love the mutant designs in this game, of which we'll see more as we get further into the plot, but these are some peak body horror designs that I absolutely love. They retain some of the features of the host, but are mostly disfigured by the infection, and I just really like when games do that. If you're thinking at this point that the game sounds a lot like the movie The Thing, that's what I said, and also what reviewers at the time said, but that's okay because The Thing is a fantastic movie, and I think Arctic horror is a great setting, and we could use more games set in it. Just then, a woman in a hazmat suit shows up and shoots Roger and tosses us an upgrade for our ammo capacity, and tells us to meet up with the rest of our team and leave. We proceed across the bridge, which raises again after we cross, blocking us from going back there for the time being, but thankfully nearby is a storage room that contains an ammo dispenser for the basic ammo type, and the aforementioned healing bed, as well as a save terminal and battery charger. The battery is used to save the game, a la Resident Evil ink ribbons, and open certain doors, which I think is a clever idea to add a bit more resource management to the game. Eventually, we meet up with a woman who turns out to be Cindy, the girlfriend of Dennis's best friend Andrew, who he served with in Cambodia and was killed on duty there at some point before the events of the game. The two haven't spoken since then and seem to have a strained relationship over his death. This seems to be a good time to point out the voice acting and the score.
Don't you realize what you did? I'm telling you, I have nothing more to say.
Cindy, this is no time to fight.
The voice acting is very 2000s and not necessarily in a good way. Survival horror has always had interesting voice acting, and this is no exception.
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
Jed Stone!
The score and voice direction seem like they want to build suspense and drama and evoke emotion, but Dollar Store Leon Kennedy here autistically pointing out the obvious in every given situation doesn't help the case.
The drawbridge went back up. I can't go back there anymore. So, you got out okay. I have to jump that crevice. Infection!
And at times, the score doesn't exactly fit what is happening on screen. Nonetheless, the cheesy voice acting can be quite entertaining at times, and the story is still very much interesting enough that the questionable voice acting doesn't detract from it too much. Anyway, Cindy instructs us to take the nearby elevator to get to Building B, so after some backtracking to unlock the elevator, which the game seems very insistent upon doing, we're able to call the elevator. The doors open to reveal the first humanoid enemies of the game, which also look very cool. These guys just charge at you and will do some good damage to your health and infection rate if they manage to hit, but aren't all that spooky by themselves. Upon defeating it, it drops a dog tag from one of Dennis's squad mates, which may or may not allude to the fate of most of the people at the fort. We take the elevator and are met with freelance journalist Travis Miller, who praises us for killing the monster, which we promptly respond with by knocking him to the ground.
Bruh.
He explains that he's been investigating the facility for 5 years and finally managed to sneak in order to get the scoop on this place. With a little too much self-awareness, he fills us in on the plot of the game, where in classic sci-fi horror fashion, they were making a bioweapon and it broke loose. He then tells us how to get to Building B from there, which involves going out into the Antarctic weather. We blow up a radio tower to make a bridge over some fences to get across the snowfields to Building B, and are met with these invisible assholes that the game calls predators, not the Chris Hansen kind, but the movie kind, which also can turn invisible. The wiki says that they're a fusion of lab predators and primates, which I'm seeing more of a lion kind of form here, but who am I to argue? It's monkey now. These guys hit pretty hard, but honestly you can just run past them as they're too clunky to really get you unless you completely stop moving. We make it to the end of this area, but to get to Building B, we need to go through a water filtration plant, which is basically a linear gauntlet of monkey bars and narrow ledges that we have to slide past. Once we get about halfway through, we're shown a cutscene of the commanding officer of the base, Carl Morris, trying to stop a creature from opening the floodgates, who promptly swats him away like a fly, opens the gate, and then fucks off to take a big sip of water, which further mutates the creature. We have a chat with the dying Carl, who, after reciting the game's favorite line,
"Didn't they tell you anything?"
tells us about a man with the comically made-up bad guy named Falcon, who runs the research for the base. Remember that for later. Before dying, he also informs us that there's something special about the water if you couldn't gather that from the earlier cutscene of the creature drinking and mutating. Real helpful last words, buddy.
"It's too late now. I'm dead."
Funny part about this area is that the guy that kills him just paces back and forth, and you can shoot him without even having to be in the same area as him. Not relevant to the plot, but I thought it was kind of funny. Anyway, speedrunning ahead of more platforming, we finally meet up with the remaining members of the team, which comprises of Falil, McDonald's, who we never see again, and Major Mike Madigan. The Major explained that everything's gone to hell, so the new mission is to blow up the facility, and he sent the rest of the team out to do so. As a failsafe, detonators were spread out through the facility which need to be activated manually, so we set out to arm them. Heading up to the roof, we find the team shooting at a mutant climbing a water tower, which we kill but destroy the water tower in the process. The water then gained sentience before immediately freezing. The Major and the others decide to set out and arm the detonators and leave you behind to get the others, which obviously splitting up has worked so well for everyone in the past. We head back inside to have a chat with Sonia, the systems engineer, who looks like everyone's alcoholic aunt and seems to be day drinking at the bar, before Cindy shows up to be moody at Dennis again. After that, we head out. Before leaving, we get a call on our radio from another member of the squad requesting help, as they're stuck in one of the labs surrounded by mutants. So we make our way through a door in the water filtration plant again, through some of the lab access ways, which loop back to the main building where we started the game. However, now it's inhabited by some of the stronger enemies in the game, as well as everything being covered in a fleshy mass caused by the bacteria now overtaking the infrastructure of the base. This is another aspect of the game which I think is really cool. Watching familiar areas slowly spiral out of control and evolve over time is such a neat aesthetic touch. Once we deal with the gunner enemies, we find a wounded member of the squad named Gary, who gives us a code for the lab to get to the first detonator. We make our way there, wandering through the research labs, where we find lore notes of Falcon studying the bacteria that all seem very well mentally adjusted. We get to the end and arm the detonator. After that, we head back to the access way that we cleared out earlier, which leads to the other lab containing the other detonator. We crawl through a ventilation shaft into a sealed room to find the body of the squad mate who called earlier. If only we didn't take a leisurely stroll there to get to him, he might have still been alive. We get his code for the lab door and set out for the other detonator. We reach the level 2 labs where the whole area is dark and clustered with tons of strong enemies. This part is a pain in the ass and a good time to mention that most of the bigger mutants are bullet spongy unless you hit the core, which is oftentimes protected until they get right near you. We fight our way through there, defeating a mini-boss style enemy, where inexplicably Travis pops out from behind a thing and gives us some information about a rocket launcher attachment for our gun. How he stayed alive after being locked in essentially a broom closet, unarmed with this giant fuck, I'll never know. Dennis gets weirdly angry about being called an army man instead of a marine, which I think is very funny, as does Travis apparently.
I'm a Marine. Don't mix us up with the Army.
Okay, a rivalry thing, I gotcha. I'll see you around, Sir Marine, sir.
He then states he got his story and is now doing the most rational thing that anyone has done in this game so far and leaves for literally the rest of the game. I don't know how he got out. Truly, he is the biggest enigma of this game, the G-Man of not Half-Life games. We press on, do some more light platforming, and make it to the second detonator, which we arm. In the process, we find more completely sane lore notes written by Falcon. After that, we get a call from Cindy, who explains that the Major and others failed in arming the one detonator that they were in charge of and need you to come bail them out. We make it back to the infirmary, where Cindy tells us that the bacteria grows rapidly when exposed to heat, and someone raised the temperature of the reactor. We have to head over to the reactor before the Major walks into a trap. Gary shows up not dead, and side tangent, what is this haircut, my guy? Is the Hitman barcode too mainstream? Anyway, we head out for more of this game's favorite thing, backtracking. Yay, so good. We make it back to the starting area that we set on fire on accident, and there's a train that'll take us to the reactor. However, we have to fight the Executioner, which, with such a badass name, you'd assume it would look really cool too, right? Nah, fight this giant sentient uvula. This is a very damaged, spongy boss, and really, it's just overall not all that great. But once we deal with it, we get the key for the train. We hop in and drive right through the now fleshy wall into the snowfields. We stumble across a wounded Filial who states that the Major shot him and then dies. We get some climbing spikes and climb the icy wall to the reactor, where the Major waits for us at the top. We tell him about the water in the reactor and how we need to blow it up. Conveniently, he tells us about an explosive that Gary made, which is located in the nearby wreck of the plane that we flew in on. We head there to get the explosive and are met with more gunner enemies in a very confined space that we need to platform to get out. This section sucks and I hate it. Upon making our way out, we're called by the Major, who tells us that he got the elevator running to the reactor and he went ahead, always a great move. He then yells about Roger before the line cuts.
Roger!
Roger?
We make our way to the top and are confronted by a heavily mutated Roger, who we taunt for being controlled by the bacteria, as if he had any way to stop it from happening.
What I want to know is how come a tough guy like you let some bacteria eat him for lunch? Was that all a lie? Answer me, Roger.
As cheesy as the scene is, I low-key thought it was pretty cool because I'm a sucker for such cliches. Worthwhile mentioning here that the game is already very hard, and this boss fight is actually an even more wild difficulty spike. He hits hard, takes a ton of damage to kill, and this single part of the game ate a good chunk of my healing items that I've been stockpiling over the course of the game. We finally put him out of his misery, we collect his knife and dog tag before walking over to talk to the wounded Major. He extends a bridge for us to cross and explains why he killed Filial. Falila was planted by the feds to secure a sample of the bacteria, and was one of the only ones who knew what was going on here before arriving, and was supposed to be the only one to make it out alive. The Major was informed on this and was given the secret mission to destroy all the samples of the bacteria so it couldn't be weaponized or get out of hand again, causing the destruction of mankind. He instructs us to get to a control panel and get a disc, before giving us a cliche but kind of hype monologue where he promotes us to the leader of the team, of which there's one other person aside from yourself left, before deciding to sacrifice himself to arm the bomb. I'm pretty sure it wasn't necessary, but it does make for one of the few effective emotional cutscenes in the game.
That's a promotion, Dennis. Now go.
Major.
We zipline out of there like a badass as the bomb goes off, where it then cuts to Gary and Cindy, where he basically tells her it's not Dennis's fault that her boyfriend died, and they were best friends, so he also took it hard, but he's a good guy and she should chill the fuck out. We land just outside the entrance of the main building where we started, to retrace our way into the building taking the exact route. We need to get the disc we picked up back to Cindy at the infirmary. Crossing the base again, and getting back to the infirmary, we decode the contents of the disc, which give us a name drop of the game, which I hate that I love.
Project name, Extermination.
Extermination?
It also tells us the last detonator is in the maximum security area, and the events of the game, including sending the Marines in, were a planned experiment in order to test the capabilities of the bacteria. After that, we head to the maximum security area to finish the mission, which means backtracking almost to where we were 10 minutes ago. Inside the maximum security area, we find a big meteor-looking object in a tube. Dubbed the Origin, it's one of two that crashed to Earth long ago that housed the bacteria that was being kept at Fort Stewart. The first one got out of hand, so the lab below the fort was closed off, but hey, that definitely couldn't happen a second time, right? We get to the observation platform and are confronted by Falcon, who crawls out of the hole that he was hiding in and threatens to shoot us to protect the Origin. The Origin then shakes, which causes part of the ceiling to fall, killing Falcon in the goofiest way possible.
For the love of my son. Crazy bastard. Now look, you've made him angry. He doesn't like you and your petty insults.
I guess he didn't like you as much as you liked him.
I like how they hyped this guy up as the big bad guy, and he ended up having less screen time than the man who literally removed himself from the plot. We arm the detonator, which releases all the research specimens in the room. We run past them and make a dash to get out of the facility before it explodes. We get a call from Cindy and Gary, who tell us that they're waiting at a dock with a boat, so in the final bit of backtracking, we make our way one last time through the facility and make it to the dock.
We can escape on this military hovercraft.
I'll be right there.
Hurry up, man! I don't want to be barbecued along with those damn monsters!
We get a cutscene of the Origin infesting some water and leaving the meteor just as we're leaving on the boat as the facility explodes. We hear a noise and go out to check what it is. The Origin takes the form of a giant sea monster and chases us down, and I just have to say now that this might be the worst boss fight in the history of boss fights. The Dark Souls of Resident Evil clones, so to speak. Leading up to this fight, the game only took me maybe 3 hours to beat, but I shit you not, this fight alone took me like an hour of retrying because it's just that unbalanced. So if you don't have a ton of healing items stocked up from the beginning of the game, it is a painful experience. This is made even more difficult if you miss one of the parts for the rocket launcher and thus don't have it like I did on the first playthrough. This is a 3-stage fight where it leaps at you in sea monster form, shooting infectious blobs at you and spawning bugs. The second is where it becomes a big hulking creature that paces back and forth on the boat, shooting rockets and occasionally swiping at you while spawning more bugs and raining more infectious blobs. This is probably the most annoying part of the fight in my opinion. And in the last stage, it takes the form of Dennis and shoots at you. This is just a stat check to see if you have any healing items left, as there's really no good area to take cover, so it boils down to you two seeing who could eat the most dirt and slap each other harder. After defeating it, we have a heart-to-heart with Cindy where she finally apologizes for being such a bitch the whole game, to which Dennis vows to protect her for some reason. Gary makes it out okay.
Gary, you're alive! I was worried.
Hey, I'm in.
And they all drive off into the sunset. So after all is said and done, is this a good game? Should I play it? I really can't decide. I love the aesthetic. The cold, isolated setting of the Arctic base is so unique, and the way the facility evolves over time as the infestation worsens is some of the coolest looking aesthetic for a survival horror game I've ever seen. The enemy design is super cool, and the plot, well, not exactly new, is fun and interesting enough to have kept my interest the whole way through. On the other hand, the enemies are a bit bullet spongy, and the controls and platforming, while playable, are still a bit janky at times. The pacing feels a bit rushed near the end of the game, and tonally, the game is all over the place, but at least that's funny at times. Looking back on it, Extermination had a lot of neat ideas that really tried to push the survival horror genre, such as the infection system, the battery being used for saving in various doors throughout the map, and the customizable on-the-fly weaponry. The game didn't revolutionize the genre, however, all of these ideas were really neat from the time. Keep in mind this was still the early days of the PS2 and the game felt like it. It's the awkward in-between stage for survival horror, and that's why I don't think it's as finely remembered as some of the games that came after it. However, that doesn't mean it's bad by any means. Clunky at times for sure, but still overall a fun experience. For fans of the survival horror genre who may have never heard of this underground gem, it's worth checking out. I personally enjoyed it for what it was, not as a franchise for sure, but a fun one-off experience that serves as a unique lens into the evolution of the genre. I've been Meaty, thank you for watching my video, roll the outro. Hi there. If you watched until now, I just wanted to say thank you, it really means the most to me. Don't forget to hit the like button on this video as it pleases the YouTube algorithm, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Also, let me know what you thought about this video in the comments. Do you like the format? What did you think of the game itself? And do you have any games like this that you know of? Let me know down below. If you want to see more of my content, I'll have playlists in the end card as well as the description, right above my socials if you want to follow me on any of that. Twitter, Discord, etc. If you really like my content, you want to support me in what I do here, there's a Patreon link too where you can get your name in the credits as well as early access to my videos and periodic input on video ideas, but no pressure, I'm just happy that you watch this. Speaking of patrons, a huge thank you to NDH for your support. You help me to continue to make these silly videos and I appreciate that a lot. Thank you all once again for watching, have a good one, and I'll see you next time.